Alright, so about a year ago, I made a video talking about all the biblical references and all the symbolism in Stellar Blade. And I forgot to mention a couple of things in that video when I was making it. And I do want to correct the mistake that I did make in that video as well. And since I am replaying the game again, I did actually notice new biblical references that I actually didn't notice before. So I do want to talk about it in this video. So naturally, this video will contain spoilers of the game. So if you've not played the game or if you haven't finished it, I highly recommend you do that first before you watch this video. And also, I do recommend you guys watch part 1 first if you haven't seen it, because I'm not going to go through that again because all that was already covered in the first video. And basically this video is going to be a continuation, so make sure you guys watch part 1 first if you haven't seen it. I'll leave it in the cards now. Click on that video, watch that first, and then come back to this one. So with that all being said, let's get into the video. So welcome to part 2, and the first biblical reference that I want to talk about, which is the one I actually completely forgot to talk about in the first video, is the Natibas themselves. And as you might guess, the Natibas are definitely a reference to demons. Especially the way they look, because, they're very twisted, they're ugly, zombified, ugly demons in a sense, right? So basically they're kind of like, demonic, twisted killing machines in a sense, right? But another thing is that if you guys have played the game, you know that they're the original humans that turned into these creatures, right? But the thing is also is that when the humans are turning into these creatures, it's also a reference to the 7 deadly sins, because they got overwhelmed by the negative emotions as well, because like desire, for example, because some of them, they were hunted by the android Ados, and they need humans needed that way to fight back. So when they turned into the Natibas, they got a desire to where they need to kill these things, and that's all they could think about. So they had that negative emotion, negative attachment to desire, to where they needed to wipe out these androids in a sense, right? And also, if you read the information in the game about when just before the humans turned into these creatures, is that they were getting very negative thoughts. So that the last human race, they got to do something. So they started to think very negative. Like they were turning very dark. Some of them even have really dark thoughts as well. To where they said we got to do this thing. So otherwise we can't survive. We got to be more than human. Right, so then when they turn into these things, that's all they can think about is just pure destruction, and that's all. Also, most of the Natiba bosses, they all have demon names, and they're high-ranking demon names like Abaddon, Bilal, and all that. These are all high-ranking demon names. So yeah, so the biblical reference for the Natibas are demons. So yeah, that's the thing with the Natibas. Now, the next biblical reference is Zion itself, the city of Zion. So if you look at the design, it's basically Zion is high up and there's a wall around it. This is a biblical reference to Mount Zion, for example, because Mount Zion is located in Jerusalem. And if you look at Jerusalem, there's a wall around it. Like again, the biblical reference is here, it's here as well, because there's a wall around Israel, right? It's Jerusalem, there's a wall around it, and Mount Zion, which is up on top, right? Which is the same thing as Zion in the game, which is the high up, and there's a wall around it where it protects them from the Tebas. So that's another biblical reference there, and of course its name. And you know what? Now that I think about it, this is why I think that accepting Adam's hand is actually the canon ending, because if you take Eve as the Messiah in a sense, because in the Bible it says that when Jesus comes back, he's going to rule from Mount Zion, which I think it's in Isaiah somewhere there in one of those chapters. It actually said Jesus will rule from there. So there's another biblical reference there, because if you notice at the end of it, we know when you accept out of hand, the last scene you see of Eve, she's up on top of a building looking down at the crowd. This is another reference. This is another biblical reference, because she's ruling from Mount Zion, kind of like Jesus, like the Savior, because she's ruled as a Savior, which I mentioned in the last video. Because Eve is the Savior, similar to Jesus, where he's ruling from Mount Zion, looking down at the people. See, there's another thing where they're going to receive God's laws. You know what I mean? So this is very similar to what happens with Eve, because Eve, she's staying on top of this building, looking down on the people, and then she flies down, and everyone's waiting for her. Similar to Jesus, you know what I mean? So there's a few biblical references there by itself. Because another reference is that, because here's the thing, right? When Eve fuses with Adam, she gets the power of creation, which is another thing similar to what would happen at the end of days, for example, where if your name is not in the book of life, you don't receive eternal life, which is kind of similar thing. Is because now Eve now has the power of creation. She can actually create things now. She's, in a sense, she is the Messiah now. You know what I mean? And she is ruling from Mount Zion. Well, in a sense, but you know what I mean, from where she came down. So that's a reference there as well. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's interesting. That is actually quite interesting that I really think about it. Unless I'm overlooking it, and then they decide to go with a different ending in the next game, and then I just sound like a complete idiot. But yeah, these are all definitely biblical references because it is in the Bible and the references are there. So whether it's intentional or not intentional, it's all there. So yeah, it is what it is. But anyway, with the endings, we're gonna have to wait and see. But yeah, those references are definitely in the game. And yeah, I do find that quite interesting that they did that, to be honest with you. That is quite interesting, actually. Now, the next biblical reference, what I want to talk about, since we are talking about Zion, is I want to talk about Oracle. Now, I do want to correct a mistake that I made in the first video, is that I said in that first video is that Oracle doesn't actually know that Adam is the Alternativa, but that is actually wrong because, of course, he actually knows that Adam is the Alternativa because otherwise, where would he get the Alpha Core from? Adam had to give that to him. And if you say like, oh, maybe he did in his transform state, he didn't recognize him, but I don't think that's the case because there is a line when he's talking to Eve, he mentions that maybe it is better to hear it from the elder's mouth. That's obviously hinting at, that Adam is the Alternativa and he has to actually know that it is him. So, of course, he does know. So, I didn't want to correct that mistake. But anyway, I do apologize for that. So, let's continue on. Now, with Oracle, as I mentioned before, is in that video as well, is that since he is the Oracle, he's also serving as like the prophet in a sense, right? And he's also the leader of Zion. Well, that's the way it's portrayed, but it's obviously, serving Adam. But also, if you read the information in the game, he can also represent a false prophet. Because here's the thing, as you're playing through the game and you look at it on the surface, everybody you meet respects, the Oracle. They do respect him and he's a good leader, they say, right? And he's respectable and all that. But there is a rebel group that views him as a villain, like, he's a lie, he's the false prophet. And I actually say he's the false prophet because they mention, because what happens is they used to go with the whole thing about the cradle because they're running out of energy and they need, they need some of the androids to, because they think they're humans, right? So they got to sleep to save energy and all that stuff, right? And some people want to go against it, they call him the false prophet. So Oracle kind of represents both a false prophet and an actual prophet. So it's kind of like in between. Or he could just represent, just a priest or something like that, where people agree with him or people don't agree with him. Or actually, even a normal prophet, because even when you read the Bible, when there's a prophet, there are some people, like his followers do believe he's the actual prophet. Well, the enemy side, they point the figure say you're a false prophet, you know what I mean? So there's another biblical reference there in a sense. And it is exactly the same with Oracle because you got one side that respects him while the other side calls him a false prophet. So there's a few things going on here. There's a few biblical references here. He presents an actual real prophet and he does also represent a false prophet and all that in between. So yeah, that's what's going on. So there's a few things actually going on with Oracle. So yeah, that's the thing with Oracle. Okay, now I want to talk about Adam. Now, in my previous video, I think I've confused a lot of people when I called Adam a protector. So let me address this. So when I called Adam a protector, I'm referring to what he's basically doing in the game. Now, I know he's got another agenda and stuff like that. If you play the game, you know what I mean. But yeah, I wasn't referring to that. What I'm referring to, because in the game, what he's doing is he's scavenging for Zion and he's protecting Eve with a drone. That's what I was referring to when I called him my protector. Because throughout most of the game, all he does is basically he's protecting Eve with the drone. He's also guiding her through areas, explaining things to her, like what's going on and stuff like that. Which is kind of like the biblical reference could be here, like, for example, the protective angel in a sense, right? So it's because he's kind of like protecting Eve in a sense. But look, like I said, I know he's got another agenda and all that stuff. But you know what? Here's the thing. Whether you can trust Adam or not, I'm going to make a separate video talking about whether you can trust Adam or not, because that deserves its own video and I have to go into the law and I have to explain a lot of stuff. But in this video, all I'm talking about is biblical references, that's all. So I do know that he's got other things going on, but I'm just talking about biblical references here because the reference here is that, like I said, because he's going because through most of this game, all he does is he explains things to Eve, explains to her what's going on. He guides her through areas, and he's protecting with a drone in a sense, right? That's what he does throughout most of the game. So that's what I was referring to when I called him a protector. Now, when I said that he represents the whole heavenly host, is because there is a story in the Bible to where there's these enemies who are going to attack Israel, and what happened is God sent an angel to destroy the enemy soldiers overnight, and then basically this angel wiped out everything, but this angel had to be ordered to stop for him to stop, and then he went back to heaven. Right? That's what happened. This is kind of very similar to Adam as well, because here's the thing with Zion, because he's kind of protecting Zion in a sense, to where he's protecting it, but he needs the humanity to tell him to stop, because he's the Elder Natiba, because if he goes out of control, he will just destroy everything. You know what I mean? So he needs his humanity to actually make himself stop in a sense, because I think that's also a little bit of a biblical reference there as well, because he is protecting Zion in a sense. Well, at least you know what I mean. Because the Natibas like basic crazy killing machines, but because Adam has his humanity, he can stop. You know what I mean? Because like that angel, as I mentioned before, when he killed the enemy soldiers to protect Israel, he specifically had to be ordered to stop. Right? He had to be ordered to stop. Otherwise, he would have kept killing and killing and killing. Would have never have stopped. But God had to order him to stop. This is kind of very similar to Adam, because with his humanity he could stop in a sense. But keep this in mind, because because I got a theory kind of thing as well, which I'm gonna explain at the end of the video. So keep all that in mind. Now, I do want to thank one of my viewers for bringing this up, because I actually didn't know this when I played it originally. But Adam is actually Raphael Marx. So I actually didn't know that when I played through the game, because it's kind of hinted here and there, but never confirmed. But if you're at the last part of the game, when you're in the nest, bring up Adam's character bio up, and it'll actually tell you that he is Raphael Marx. So it is confirmed that he is Raphael Marx, and I actually didn't know that. But now that I know, there's more, it brings more things into perspective as well. So, like I said, I'll make a video. Whether you can trust Adam or not, but I'll make a separate video for that. So anyway, the thing is that also there's that same user we were talking about, like he might represent Lucifer. Now there is elements to that, but the more and more I thought about it, I think he might represent another angel, which is almost perfect for him. And that angel is called Samyaza. I think that's the way you pronounce it. And Samyaza, who he was, is basically in the book of Enoch, he was the leader of the Watchers. And what happened was with the Watchers is that they said, you know what, he told the other angels to, let's get wives of our own, right? So then they made it with humans, and then they brought forth the Nephilim, right? And then God brought the flood to destroy the Nephilim. That's what it says in the book of Enoch. Now, this is actually very similar to with Adam, because just like Samyaza, he created Mother Sphere, right, to make a perfect human race in a sense, because that was his goal, right, to create a perfect human race. But Mother Sphere, and she rebelled, so she created them. It's because when she looked at the angel Eidos, they were perfect for her, so she wiped out all the organic humans, all the real humans, and like with a similar to what God does with the flood, right, in the story, right? But then what happens is that Adam, when he was called Raphael Marx, he turned human into Natibas, right, which he became Yalda Natiba, right? This is actually very similar to the story of the Nephilim as well, in a sense. And you can even throw in his fusion with Eve, because now that you have the Natiba and an Agile Eris together, now you have a mixture of a being to create an entirely new being, similar to how those angels made it with human to create a angel-human hybrid in a sense, right? Similar to the Nephilim in a sense. So you can view it like that way as well. And that angel, the more I think about it, that fits more perfectly with Adam, because even with the angel, he's a liar and he brought a lot of destruction on the earth. Very, very similar to Lucifer You know what I mean? So I think the angel is actually a perfect better fit for him, because especially with all the fuck ups he did as well. You know what I'm saying? And also, if you bring up the story with the Nephilim, to God's eyes, the Nephilim were abominations. Very, very similar to the Natibas, because the Natibas look like abominations, you know what I mean? It fits there. And also, with Raphael Marx, when he created the Natibas, when he turned himself into the other Natiba, he became one of them, you know what I mean? Like he became Adam. This is very similar to what happens with Semyaza, right? Because when Semyaza took human wives, he mixed them, he created the Nephilim. And when the flood came, it destroyed the Nephilim, and Semyaza and his watchers became fallen angels, which is very similar to what happens with Adam. It's almost identical. So yeah, so Semyaza fits in perfectly in a sense. But also at the same time, he also represents a positive side, like I said, because throughout most of the game, he's depicted as a protector, even though he's got his own agenda going. So that's the thing with Adam. So there's actually quite a few things going on with Adam. So yeah, that's the thing with Adam. And speaking about characters that actually have two references, there is another character in a similar situation, and that character is Lily. Now, if you analyze Lily's character, she clearly represents the pure soul, like that can do no wrong. Like, the innocent one, the free-spirited one, she's a free spirit, so she represents the pure soul. And she always tries to do the right thing. Now, in the Bible, there is an end-time prophecy where a pure soul will be killed because they're too pure. Now, I'm not too sure exactly where it says that. I think it's in Revelations, but I'm not too sure. But yeah, that's one of the end-time prophecies, which is actually going to be one of the signs that need to happen for the end of times. So how does that relate to Lily? So one of the endings in the game, if you don't do everything and you accept Adam's hand, Eve has to fight the robot that Lily's inside of it, and because the thing is she can't hack it because she doesn't have she doesn't have that hacking chip that she needed. Because if you do everything in the game, you get the hacking chip to where she needs to do it so she can get out of the suit, but she doesn't have that. So during the battle, Lily does die because of the result of that battle. Which, by the way, I hope to God that they don't go with this ending, because this ending sucks, by the way. So anyway, like I said, because the reason why she dies is because the way it's portrayed is like you kind of failed her in a sense, which is kind of similar to the prophecy, because when that pure soul dies, the world failed her. Because the reason why it happens is because the world is too evil at the time, and I think this pure soul is like a threat, so they have to eliminate it in a sense, right? So when it comes to Lily, the reason she dies in the game at that point is because you failed, because you didn't collect all the information in the game to find out what the world is like, right? Because you got those things you got to pick up and stuff. If you don't pick them up, she dies in that ending, and that's the ending you get. But if you do pick them up, she gets saved. It's kind of like there is symbolism there of that prophecy. Now, keep that all in mind, because I will go back to this, because when I start talking about Mother Sphere, there is a connection to this as well. There's another symbolism thing here as well. So keep this part in mind. Now, there is another symbolism going on with Lily as well, and that is her name, right? Lily. So the name Lily actually comes from the name Lilith. So who was Lilith? Now, this doesn't actually come from the Bible. I think it's an old Jewish belief. I'm not sure about the origins of how this story originated. Let me know in the comments below if you know, but I do know the story. But the way it goes is that when Adam was in the Garden of Eden, his first wife was Lilith. And what happened with Lilith was she didn't like that Adam was the dominant force, so she left Adam. So she left the Garden of Eden. She rebelled against God, and then she became the creature of the night. So how does this relate to Lily? So with Lily, as you're playing through the game, as you're going through the story, you find more things about Mother Sphere, that she's not this godlike being, she's just an AI. And near the end of the game, Lily does kind of reject the idea of Mother Sphere being God. So that there's a lot like a rebellious thing going on with Lily. And even in the scene that I mentioned before, with the one when she dies. So when she's dying, she actually tells Eve that she doesn't want to become one with Mother Sphere. And that, that's like rebelling. There's a rebellious thing to her too now. You know what I'm saying? So there's symbolism there as well. Like even as going at the end of the game, she doesn't even want to go back to the colony, I think, because she wants to stay in Zion and protect the people of Zion and work for them kind of thing going as well. So it's kind of like, how Lilith leaves the Guardian of Eden. It's kind of the same thing, kind of thing going with Lily. Like she doesn't want to go back to the colony anymore. She wants to stay on Earth and help the people of Zion. You know, there is a rebellious thing of going on because she revered Mother Sphere as God, right? But now she's rejecting that idea. So it's kind of like Lilith's story a little bit. Well, technically, what I should say is that she doesn't really. It's not like she doesn't want to go back to the colony. It's more like the hierarchy. Like she's starting to reject Mother Sphere's rule in a sense, if that makes sense. Because, you know, she does feel like she's been lied to, you know what I mean? Because she thought she was this revered thing, but now when she's figured out, you know, she's not who she says she is, and now, you know, she feels like she's being lied to. So, you know, now she just wants to stick with Eve, pretty much. Now, I want to talk about Mother Sphere. Now, I had a couple of discussions, and I've seen a lot of people online saying that Mother Sphere is basically, the symbolism here is basically she is God, right? Now, I can see the elements of what they're talking. There's definitely elements of that. I can see where people are going, but I'm still sticking that she more represents Lucifer. And let me explain why. Because when it comes to Mother Sphere, now I did explain this in the previous video, but I'm going to give you more detail. So, see, the thing is with Mother Sphere, she is very prideful. Like, everything's got to go her way, and she thinks she's going to save humanity, even though she was the destruction of humanity. And not only that, she thinks she's all-knowing. So she actually is betraying herself as she is God. Like, she was the creator. Like, she is the path forward. Well, but she's the one that caused everything to happen. Because here's the thing when it comes to Mother Sphere. When she was created to be the perfect AI, the AI that's gonna know everything. She was created to be that. That is very close to how Lucifer, to the story of Lucifer, because when God created Lucifer, he created him to be perfect, to be superior to all the angels. But what happened is he became prideful, and he rebelled, and he caused a war in heaven. This is very, very similar to what happens with Mother Sphere. She was created to be something like the perfect AI. She when she got on, you know, all the knowledge, she became like she thinks she's all knowing. So what did she do? Well, she created the angel Eidos, and then she went to war with the humans. She destroyed the humans, which is similar to the war in heaven. You know what I mean? But in this case, you know, Mother Sphere wins. Here's another one. So when the surviving humans turned into the Natibas, right, they started to push the Angel Eidos back. So what she tried to do is she tried to make the Angel Eidos more better, more powerful, right? So what she does is that she sends a group of angels, right, from the colony down to Earth, only to get them killed, to get the data from the combat, like what happened in combat, and then to use that for the next generation of androids. Of the Android Eidos. This is not something that God will do. This is something that the devil will do. Send someone to their deaths, thinking that the guy sending them to their deaths is God, right? And then only to create something better to fight back against. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is not something that God will do. This is something that the devil will do. You know what I mean? Because the thing is with Mother Sphere, the way it works is that combat data goes straight back to Mother Sphere, including the memories of the Android Eidos that died. That's what happens. So when every Android Eidos that dies, right, it goes all back to Mother Sphere, making Mother Sphere all-knowing, if you know what I mean. This is not something that what happens. Because here's the thing, right? In the Bible, when someone dies, they go to heaven. They don't become one with God. That doesn't happen. But in this case, that's what happens. To make Mother Sphere more powerful, to make herself more better, it's all about her. You know what I mean? All about her pride. It's only I and only my way. You know what I mean? We know what I'm getting at? Now, I know what you guys are going to say. Hang on, what about the airborne squads? You know, what about them? Because they're clearly the depiction of angels. You know, they're the angels falling from the sky to rebel against the demons, right? So doesn't that make Mother Sphere God in a sense? Well, like I said, there is elements of that. But the thing is that when Shift Up was developing this story, they weren't thinking about the story of the Bible, right? They just wrote their own story the way they wanted to make it, and then they added the references later. So it's not like Mother Sphere represents God and Adam represents the devil, and it's not like that. You know what I mean? Because the thing is also, when it comes to Eve, she clearly represents the Messiah, as I mentioned in the previous video. You know what I mean? So it's not like cut and dry. It's exactly the story of the Bible, if you guys know what I'm getting at. It's just that when they wrote the story, they did it their own way. They wrote the story their own way, and then they added the references later. Remember, it's just references, nothing else. I want you guys to keep that in, and to know that as well, because the thing is that I do want to make some lore videos as well and discuss who these characters actually are. I want to make separate videos of that, so don't worry about that. But for now, we're just talking about the symbolism in Stellar Blade. Now, about Mother Sphere. Now, another thing, and I think this is a big thing as well. She does not care about the Android ADOS. She literally like sends them to their deaths. She doesn't care about their like who they are, what their feelings are. She doesn't care. You know, she just does whatever she wants, and she only does it her way. If someone rebels, you know you're getting the axe. That's how it is. That's how she works. And also the other thing is that clearly Mother Sphere is going to be the final villain of this whole series. Unless we introduce to another villain, but I don't think so. But the way the story is going, she's going to be the final villain. And it's going to come down to Eve. It has to do battle with Mother Sphere, right? And obviously, you know, the symbolism is probably going to be like, you know, what's going to happen in Armageddon when Jesus comes back. So you're going to have Eve, which is the Messiah, is going to fight, you know, the Antichrist, the devil, which is Mother Sphere. That's coming. I can guarantee you that's going to happen. Because, and like I said, unless we're going to introduce to a whole new threat and there's a new villain and then they have to like join forces to fight this new threat, which I don't think that's going to happen, but we're going to have to wait and see. But the way the story is going, that's the way it's going to happen, I think. So yes, when it comes to Mother Sphere, I can see more symbolism to Lucifer rather than God. Now, of course, there's elements of that, but it's more to Lucifer because I can see that. Because she is prideful. Now, I can see that the video is actually getting a bit too long, so I'm gonna end it soon. But I just want to talk about another thing, a theory that I have, or a theory symbolism thing that I have, because I think there is a symbolism going on here. That's something that does represent God. There is a thing that does represent God, and that is the idea of humanity. Because the thing is that in universe, the thing about humanity is the Android Eras think they're humans. But it's kind of like the thing they're trying to get to what they were before. It's kind of like hope. We're trying to get to that hope. So the idea of humanity serves kind of like hope in this universe. Because let me give you guys what I'm talking about, right? So when Shift Up was developing this the story of this game, so basically the CEO, what's his name? I always forget the CEO's name, but he was when he was thinking about the story of this game, what it's gonna be. He was inside of a taxi. And the streets were empty, and then he was wondering to himself, if humanity were to disappear completely, can it be replaced, or would it be able to come back, or would it be able to change? That's the question he was asking himself when he was developing this story. Because also another thing is that the game is also very influenced by Nier Automata. Now in Nier Automata, the idea of humanity in that is like, what does it mean to be human in that thing? That's the thing going on there. What does it mean to be human? In this one, it's more like, can humans come back in a sense? Can we bring it back? Or if we bring it back, can we make it better? That's kind of like the thing going on with Stellar Blade. So it's kind of like, when I view humanity, it's kind of like, especially with Eve, like with the main characters, like with Eve, Adam, and Lily, when I view humanity, it's kind of like the symbol of hope almost. Like they're trying to get to it in a sense, if you guys know what I'm talking about. Now, I could be overstretching this, but that's what I do think. But like I said, I could be overstretching it, but, you know, that's just my thoughts on that. And another thing when it comes to Eve, like especially like if they do go with this ending, so when you take Adam's hand and you merge with him and you get the better ending where Lily lives, you know, and you restore Zion. Basically, what happens is that when she merges with Adam, she gets the power of creation to create life. So you know what I'm saying? Because now she's merged with what used to be human. She's got the DNA. Because when Adam told Eve, "You have no human DNA at all. You were created from scratch." So now that she's merged with him, because Adam he has the DNA of a human. So now that they're merged, you know, now she's in a sense part human, even though it's like turned the T, but she's part human now, a real human. And now she's got the power of creation, and she is. She's depicted as an angel in a sense, but she's more human to compare to anything in this universe now. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like she's like, even if you take Eve like that, she is the hope that they're trying to get to. So even at the end of the thing where she like as I mentioned before at the start of this video, when she was up on that roof, it's similar to, you know, like where when Jesus come back, he's going to rule from the mountain of Zion. when he's looking down, when Eve is looking down, I think it's kind of like the same thing because they're looking at her for to be a savior to them, if you know what I'm getting at. So there is a symbol of hope. So the idea of humanity in this universe is the symbol of hope, and I think that's what represents God in this universe. Okay, so I can see the video is getting quite long, so I think I'm going to end it here. I'm pretty sure there are other biblical references and symbolism that I completely missed. And guys, let me know what biblical symbolism you guys noticed. Let me know all about it in the comment section below. Anyway, that's enough from me. Like and subscribe if you like this kind of content. And yeah, thank you for watching.